What makes you the happiest? What gives you genuine happiness? My dad was a pretty big drug addict. Stayed in Vietnam for a third tour as the drugs were better. He grew weed, made meth, did coke, smoked crack, you name it, and quite literally one of two pieces of life advice he gave me was never ever try heroin. The other was don't try and piss with a boner. I mean, he was batting 100% with good advice, just lacked plate appearances. I piss with a boner all the time. Outside is my preferred method. It doesn't matter where it goes and it's guaranteed to fire away from you, so no hands needed. Well, as long as you don't piss into the wind. You can also sit on the toilet backwards. It gives you enough wiggle room to slowly pee in the toilet without making a mess. Issue here is going slow. I was on a morphine drip when they handed me my firstborn daughter. It had been a tough labor ending in an emergency C-section. I had been nervous about whether she'd even be okay. So when they handed her to me, she was healthy and pink. I was high on morphine. There will never be another moment in my life that good. But yes, opiates are bad except when you really need them.
Same with filler sounds, depending on your native language. When you're focusing, thinking or confused, you're probably going to say some variation of a, pm and so on. These filler sounds follow a trend based on your native language. For example, Americans tend to learn towards and and even though we both speak English, Australians tend to use and it's partly the accent, but because people involuntarily make these filler noises, people who are putting on an accent forget to affect the filler sounds, and it can default to their natural accent. There was a riddle in Harry Potter, Goblet of Fire, that illuminated to me the different styles of speaking between the US and UK. First, think of the person who lives in disguise, who deals in secrets and tells naught but lies. I thought of a con. The answer was a spy. Next, tell me what's always the last thing to mend, the middle of middle and end of the end. It's D. And finally, give me the sound often heard during the search for a hard-to-find word. I said but the answer was the Britisher, so I thought THW answer was condom, which was confusing for 13-year-old me. J.K. Rowling was looking for spider. A Russian spy comes to a cafe and orders a tea. He starts drinking it when the waiter comes up to him. You must be Russian spy. How did you find out? You left the spoon in the cup. Only Russians do that. Next time the spy walks into the cafe, orders a tea, puts in sugar, doesn't leave the spoon in the cup. A waiter comes to him. Oh, you must be a Russian spy. How the fuck did you find out? There is no spoon in the cup, but you hold your thumb like it is there. Third time the spy walks there, orders a tea, puts in sugar, doesn't leave the spoon in the cup, and holds the cup properly. A waiter comes to him. Oh, you must be a Russian spy. Are you kidding me? How? The spoon is not in the cup. Your thumb is okay, but you closed your right eye so the spoon wouldn't hit it when you take a drink. What a cool observation. One of my patients used to be a detective and was always the first appointment of the day. One day he said to me, "You didn't swim this morning." I didn't recall ever even mentioning I was a swimmer, but he had noticed a very faint pink line across my forehead every time except this one morning, and he was right. When I was stationed in Yongsan, South Korea, I had to take part in what was known as town patrol. Basically, we wrangled up drunk soldiers who were out past curfew. You could usually tell an American soldier from any of the other folks hanging around. For those that have never been, Yongsan is in the middle of Seoul, one of the biggest cities in the world and a melting pot of culture. Most younger American soldiers usually ran around wearing hoodies with various American sports teams, kind of a dead giveaway. It's even funnier when they try to fake a British accent and don't know any British slang to go with it. When me and my mate were traveling around Australia in our early 20s, both of us are Northern English, with unusual accents. We were trying to woo a couple of delightful ladies, limited success, that were part of the crew of a US Navy aircraft carrier who were on shore leave whilst visiting Sydney. They were loading and offloading crew at the Darling Harbour area of Sydney. There was lots of bars there, via tenders. Now there was hundreds of crew milling about as they had a curfew to get back on board, so they were all gathering waiting for the next tender. At this point the Navy police, I don't know what the proper name for them is, I'll call them provosts, started to corral all these young men and women and started to process them onto the tenders. This is when we realized we had accidentally been herded into the pack, so me and my mate decided to make our farewells and disappear into the night for more dirty deeds elsewhere. We managed to get about 10 paces from the herd when we were manhandled to the floor by a group of burly Navy provosts, who started aggressively demanding we hand over our ID and suggesting we'd been really stupid to blatantly disobey the curfew order, going ashore without ID and being too drunk to speak properly. We weren't. We just had weird Northern English accents. Well, we were both English, hadn't done a single hour in any military service, and very much not part of the crew of an American aircraft carrier. We were cuffed with zip ties and led to a waiting tender when the officer in charge quickly realized that we were just a pair of drunk birds looking for some tush in the wrong place at the wrong time and promptly released us. That is my story of how I was captured by the US Navy. My dad has a similar story from when he was in the Marine Corps. His ship was on shore at the same time a British Royal Marine ship was, and somehow he and his buddy got the bright idea to fake an accent and sneak on board to the British ship. They somehow made it below deck faking an accent, acting like wasted Royal Marines coming off leave so that nobody would dare ask them an intelligent enough question to blow their cover. That is until a British officer began checking roll, realizing there were two strangers below deck on their ship. The officer asked, "Are you two Royal Marines?" To which my dad's buddy responded in his deep southern accent, "No sir, we're real Marines." Luckily for them, the Brits found it hilarious enough for them to avoid any consequences and ended up taking them back out for drinks. We actually had a moment where my supervisor for the night tried to drag in one dude with short hair. I could tell he wasn't a soldier just by looking at how he was dressed and talked, but the supervisor was dead set on trying to question him. He finally provided his ID, and while trying to apologize the dude just started making fun of my supervisor, which thankfully deflated his ego. Years ago I was doing work in Germany. I was on the call with a client and I answered "Yes sir, no sir" the whole time. He was like, "Were you ever in the US military?" I was like, "No. I was just always taught to say that." Didn't realize how American it is. Edit. For clarification, I am from Texas. Many of us in the South are taught that it's extremely disrespectful not to use that address. I forgot to answer "Yes ma'am" to my grandmother once. Got popped right across the mouth. Never failed to miss that again. We also use it in general as a term of respect, formality, not just for elders. Edit. I hate to ask, but have any of you all had to pick your own switches? As a Texan, I always called teachers Miss and Sir to get their attention, but I only started using "Yes ma" ''am/yes sir" as a teen working food service. Now I use it to be polite to employees helping me, waiters, waitresses, strangers older than me, etc. Never realized it was such a Southern thing. My cousins even had to call their parents ma'am and sir when they got in trouble. Something I think is really super Southern is employees calling customers pet names like hun, sweetie, babe, etc. A couple of my co-workers do that and they're around my age, early/mid-20s. Other Hispanic ladies in my city also call me mom/mamas/mija sometimes. This was one thing I knew intellectually, but it never really struck home for me until I was in college. My program, robotics/electronics engineering, had an entire building for itself, and so all the faculty had their offices there. There was even a student lounge with a fridge and microwave. We were living it up quite a bit actually. Anyway, one of my instructors was this darling, sweet, German lady. She always dressed, by American standards, to the nines. She had a great sense of style and always looked fantastic, but it was a bit jarring right at first to see someone always show up to work dressed like she's ready to go to a wedding while the rest of the instructors were in slacks and t-shirts. Heck, one of them always showed up in jeans and cowboy boots. Then I realized what American tourists must look like in Germany. I work in a hotel in the UK and 2 Americans checked in a couple of weeks ago. We legally have to ask for their passport details. We don't even, as far as I know, have to check the passport or photocopy it, just ask them to fill in their nationality and passport number. To be honest, the law is a relic of the Cold War, but we're still meant to do it, so we do. Under passport details, nationality, one of them wrote Irish German. My mom legitimately got angry once shortly after she got her ancestry DNA test results back when her only option on a form for ethnicity was white. She apparently wanted to put down Celtic something fierce, even though that's only 30% of her ethnicity according to her DNA test. She's just super attached to the idea that she has Scottish ancestors. So that was an 80s, early 90s thing. Coming into the mid and late 80s there was a large, in the United States anyway, call for reparations. Oprah held several shows, which were quite popular, on the topic. There was a large and well-received call to return to spiritual roots. A lot of individuals were going to Africa learning about their ancestry, etc. Long story short, the basic premise was if you were black and American born, you were African American. I came of age during this era. I grew up any time where calling someone black was very wrong. So you're going to have a generation of people like me who have been taught by circumstance the verbiage African American is appropriate. As a side note, Oprah and Jay-Z had one hell of a debate over the N-word use. It was actually very interesting to watch. I'm non-black. In my lifetime I had never seen, on TV, intelligent discussion on these topics, so it was a game changer for me. It is a pet hate of mine, this term. A black person from the UK who has never set foot in either Africa or America would be described as African American. A white South African brought up in the US would not be described as African American. It is just a cop-out in my opinion. It means black, and you could substitute every instance of the term African American with black and it would make more sense, and also be more accurate. I can only assume the word, or description, of a black guy or gal became offensive, but whoever decided that we won't say black, we will say African America is off my Christmas card list. As an American, when I first heard from my friends across the pond that most cars weren't automatic transmission, I was very surprised. Here of course it's a mix, but I'd estimate 95% of cars have automatic transmissions. It does mean that a car with a manual transmission is less likely to be stolen, though, because most people here have no idea how to drive one. It's generally more a tourist thing than a specific group. In my experience, if you're a tourist you usually expect to be out and about in unfamiliar places for longer periods of time. If you're local you know that you're half an hour from home and can grab a drink when you get back, or whatever. When I was in the ass end of Russia all the locals said haha typical English person because we also had bottles of water, despite the fact that almost none of them had ever met an English person. My Turkish and British best friend was so confused by why each person in my family had a car. They say there are way too many cars and owning cars is super American, which I'm not inclined to disagree. Edit. You're not a bad person for owning a car. Public transit isn't really established and the US is huge. but the question was asking what non-Americans think is a big American tip-off, and I listed mine. Yeah, pretty much everyone here needs their own individual car here in the US. BC basically everywhere other than New York City will have an absolute garbage public transportation system. For example, driving from home to my university takes me 15-30 minutes depending on traffic, but taking the bus, the only available public transportation in my city, takes 60-90 minutes. I will also add that during my city planning courses, most places, at least around 1970s 2000s, were built around the assumption that people would drive everywhere. There has been a shift in city planning to make places more walkable and encourage public transport, but it's incredibly difficult to transform giant urban sprawl into something remotely efficient. There's also the fact that driving is ingrained in American culture now because of our past city planning practices, among other things. Please note that I am not a professional city planner in any capacity, just have general knowledge on it. There was a AskReddit thread the other day along the lines of using food, where are you from? There was the stock standard Vegemite, Surströmming, etc. Then there was all the cheesecake and pizza answers that had replies of hello fellow Philadelphian or found the Chicagoan. They accounted for about 80% of the fucking thread. When you are on a trip and ask someone where they are from, they usually answer with their country first. I'm from France, I'm from Colombia, etc. If someone answers with something weirdly specific like I'm from place, in the area, county, close to, town, they are from the US. Bonus America, if the fella gets a bit offended you don't know where their town is. Expecting to be able to pay American currency in another country, getting mad when the currency given back in a foreign country is not American dollars, and therefore worth less. Source: worked in city with a lot of cruise ship tourists, happened all the time. We actually would accept American money, an extreme courtesy IMO, but didn't have American change to give back. The first thing we did when we took a trip to Canada a few years ago was exchange our American money for Canadian. I can't imagine traveling to another country and expecting places to just accept foreign money. Also, it's just neat seeing everyone else's money anyway, so I'd probably still do it even if it wasn't necessary for me to do so. Lol. I used to be a cashier at a place that handled a bunch of American tourists, and it was so baffling that the ones who managed to convert the currency couldn't figure out Canadian coins. They're literally all the same shape, size, color, and denomination with the sole exception of the toonie, a two-colored $2 coin. In high school I worked at a place that held various sporting events, conferences, etc., that would bring in Americans. Despite being 400 kilometers from the nearest border crossing and nearly 700 kilometers from a major American city, if you count Great Falls, Montana as a major city, we would exchange US to Canadian 1-to-1, which was already a huge favor considering that it meant a completely separate deposit ledger for us. The number of people I had get red in the face screaming and threatening me because I dared give them Canadian coins as change was staggering, and no event was worse for this than the Gospel Quartet Festival, entitled Americans and Religion as a Weapon. Name a more iconic duo. Because the Canadian dollar is worth less than the US dollar, a lot of restaurants and touristy places in Canada will actually have signs saying they accept American currency but they won't convert it. So if your drink is $5 Canadian, you need to pay $5 US, which I think is extremely accommodating already, but you'll still get some people arguing that they're being ripped off. This used to be the travel guide advice for Americans going to Mexico, Central America, or the Caribbean when I was younger. Carry American bills in small denominations and pay with that, and the locals would be so grateful. The addendum was don't expect change, and some people may not accept it, which, as I remember from traveling with my father, was overlooked by certain types of American.